Continuing our series through the portraits of faith. And if you remember first time we talked about childlike faith, looking at Adam and Eve. And then last Sunday, Donald preached on the Shunammite's faith, which was submissive faith, where we say yes to God. And today, I want to talk about someone that I will not mention just yet. I want to talk about a portrait of faith that is not usually too talked about in churches or in our lives. A few days ago, I sat with a young, and I say young because I'm also young, but even though he's 2 years older, he's still young. But I sat down with a young church planter in the office, and he was sharing with me about his vision and his plans to plant a church in Orpington. And we were just meeting to just pick my brains and stuff like this. And at some point, he asks me, "What about Vision Church?" Which was his way of asking, what is Vision Church all about? And without hesitation, I said that Vision Church is a place where people grow. It came just out of that. Now, of course, it's not automatic growth, right? It's not like you decided to become a member and all of a sudden you're Jesus, It doesn't work like that. But what I meant and what I believe to be true is that God has wired our church in such a way that a believer has the opportunity and is intentionally encouraged to grow in faith. And I remember how about 2 years ago or so, I somewhat carelessly stood up here and said that Vision Church will become a place where the only way people will not grow is by personal choice. I was not planning to say that, but I think the Holy Spirit has been speaking then. And I know that we like very much that illustration of the church being like a hospital for the sick. And I get why we say this. I really do, and I even agree with this statement. That I'm qualifying. This is true. Church is also like a hospital for the sick. But if you, as a healthy believer, view church in this way primarily, then you will develop a victim mentality and basically to the point where you will no longer want to leave your hospital bed. I actually remember, it's not in my notes, David, but you're sharing about someone who didn't want to leave his hospital bed. Like, there is a time, once you've been healed, and once God has been working, that you need to leave the hospital bed. That's the moment when church is no longer hospital for the sick, because you are not sick anymore, right? And because church is at times a hospital for the sick, you will need to vacate your bed because there are people who God is bringing here who are actually hurting. Okay? And that what we have, generally speaking, is people who assume the name of Jesus, calling themselves Christians, who never leave the hospital bed. And then we end up in a situation that many churches find themselves in, where neither do people develop and grow because they're overstaying their welcome on that hospital bed, nor are people receiving healing because other people who are supposed to be involved in assisting the doctors in mending and caring for others are laying in bed quite comfortably instead of leaving that hospital bed. The author of Hebrews is using a similar concept in his illustration to the believers, and he says, Hebrews 5:12-14, "For though by this time you ought to be teachers," you need someone to teach you, again, the basic principles of the oracles of God. You need milk, not solid food. For everyone who lives on milk is unskilled in the word of righteousness, since he is a child. But solid food is for the mature, for those who have their powers of discernment trained by constant practice to distinguish good from evil. Did you know that there are over 300 biblical imperatives commanding believers to grow in the grace and knowledge of the Lord Jesus? And I'm bewildered by the fact that way too many people who attend church, generally speaking, and maybe believe themselves to be Christians, and maybe even have grown in Christian families, do not have a desire to grow. We could almost say that there's an imperative to grow almost every single day of the year. So growth is important for God. And surely as Christians, we ought to be growing, right? Like, I don't know if anyone that is a Christian would ever come and say, well, you know what? God told me we should not grow. Like, no one thinks like this. No one even believes this. And that somehow there are times when our lifestyle reflects a certain belief system that does not align with the idea of constantly growing in the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ. Why is it that so many believers don't grow? In his chapter on spiritual growth, the Dutch theologian Wilhelmus A. Brackels explores reasons why believers do not grow as much as they ought. And he gives 5 reasons. They presume upon grace, that, well, God's grace is with me, that's fine, I know God loves me. Okay. Secondly, they doubt their conversion, and I'm sure that at times, and I myself go through those moments of like, am I saved and all that? Not because I don't believe in God, but there are sometimes seasons in our lives where we doubt our identity in Christ. That stops us from growing. They are discouraged by their progress. Because sometimes we have a process in our minds, whether it is intentional or unintentional, of by this time I should have grown for this. And then a sense of guilt accumulates in our minds, and that is what is paralyzing and stopping our spiritual growth. And then they conform themselves to the world, very easy to understand, right? If you live with the world and according to the world, you cannot grow in the image of Christ. And fifthly, they are lazy. And I was like, why did he put that in? And I'm like, you know what? I think we all know that the primary reason for healthy believers that do not grow is actually laziness. Because we can get ourselves to a point where we believe in our minds and even in our hearts everything that God says to be true, and yet we're not growing because we're not acting upon those beliefs. And remembering our justification may be the antidote for reason 2 and 3, but effort is required for number 5. There is this idea sometimes that we believe that when we become Christians, we just chill and God does all the work. He does through you for others. But we are channels through which God desires to work. And the more we grow, the more others around us are blessed. If I personally stop growing, our church will never grow as either, generally speaking. Because I need to constantly go beyond the borders like we sang. God spoke to me in this song. I've heard it and sung it forever, right, since whenever it came. What does it say? Take me deeper than my feet could ever, and my faith will be my stronger. I know we're filming, right? So, what I say about borders, someone remind me. Yeah, my faith is without borders. And as I was thinking about, I was like, as I was singing, and I always think what I sing, a little encouragement for us all. So I think God, like, where my faith is without borders. And it made me think, especially in the light of what I'm preaching today, is like, it's true. We have certain borders or limitations to our faith. And there are seasons in our lives where God is taking us beyond those borders. And what I'm learning, sometimes forcibly by God, is that He's pushing us to our limits and limitations and borders because there's something that the eye has not seen, ear has not heard, and we have not imagined that God has prepared for us. And sometimes we need to let Him push us over those limitations that we put ourselves in. And without that, we are not growing. This author, he observes that we indeed desire to be in an elevated spiritual frame and to grow as a palm tree, but we are not willing to exert any effort, and thus we also do not receive it. God's desire for your life and for my life, if you are indeed a believer, is that you grow spiritually and that your faith would mature, like the faith of our third character in Portraits of Faith, which is the Canaanite woman. And from her, we are learning about mature faith. Mature faith. And what we're going to look at today is that 3 tests that mature a believer's faith. Because your faith and my faith needs to develop, needs to be matured, and God is actively interested in doing exactly that in my life and in your life, and it's not always pleasant. So I'm going to talk about 3 tests that God is taking all of us at different times and seasons in our lives, in different ways, but we're going to see this test from her interaction with Jesus. Okay, so let me read a few verses from Matthew 5. It says this, from Matthew 15, sorry. And Jesus went away from there and withdrew to the district of Tyre and Sidon, and behold, a Canaanite woman from the region came out and was crying, and she said, "Have mercy on me, O Lord, son of David. My daughter is severely oppressed by a demon." I just want you to think about that. Like, he's not coming and asking Jesus to heal her scratch, right? I just hit my elbow on the table, right? Though Jesus heals that as well, right? But we're talking about a mother crying before Jesus because her daughter is demon-possessed. She is oppressed by a demon, right? But he did not answer her a word. And his disciples came and begged him, saying, "Send her away, for she is crying out after us." He answered, to make matters even worse, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." Remember, she was not a Jewish woman, so Jesus did not come for those 30 years to minister to non-Jewish people. All right? That's what he's saying here. But she came and knelt before him, saying, "Lord, help me." And he answered, "It is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." She said, "Yes, Lord, but even dogs eat the crumbs that fell from the master's table." Then Jesus answered her, "O woman, great is your faith. Be it done for you as you desired." And her daughter was healed instantly. The first test I want to talk about is the test of apparent silence. This Canaanite woman came to Jesus in true faith that he can heal her daughter. She kneels before him and cries out, "Have mercy on me, Lord, son of David. My daughter is severely oppressed by a demon." The image we have here is a mother who cries in desperation before a Jesus who meets her with apparent silence. Verse 23 said, "But he did not answer her a word." And I wonder how many churchgoers would react, and how do they react when they find themselves in similar situations. Probably place themselves in front of a camera and create a YouTube video about the deconstruction of faith. Or maybe, as I have personally heard from people like that, they would say, "I tried prayer and it didn't work. What Jesus is teaching us doesn't actually work," and I actually heard that. Immature believers would turn home and turn Netflix on. Immature believers would come to the conclusion that prayer doesn't work. Immature believers would give up on Jesus because he does not answer them when they expect him to and how they expect him to. Immature believers would turn their back on Jesus, on faith, and maybe on brothers and sisters as well. It reminds me of Martin Luther, who you read in his diaries that one day, as he was leaving home, he said to his wife Katie, "God is so silent on me, I think he is dead." That night, when he came back from work, the shades were drawn. Luther burst through the door saying, "Katie, who died?" "You said this morning that God had died," Katie said. And God used that rebuke to silence Luther's unbelief. God is not dead. Have you ever experienced times when God feels so distant that it's so hard to keep believing? When his presence, once so tangible, now seems far away, leaving you to wonder why. You may recall days when he felt more real than maybe even the chair that you're sitting on right now. But at this point in your life, he just seems out of reach. Why does God sometimes remain silent in the lives of his people? Well, we can't fully understand all the reasons because, after all, we are finite beings. God is sovereign and he sees the entire picture of our lives like a vast jigsaw puzzle. We, on the other hand, only see a few pieces at a time, which is why his ways are mysterious to us. It is in seasons of silence that we learn so much about God's character, about his patience, about his faithfulness, about his wisdom, and yes, about his love. In the stillness, we realize that he is not absent, but he is working behind the scenes in a way that we cannot perceive, in a way that we cannot understand. These quiet moments teach us to trust him more deeply, to rely on his timing rather than our own. we begin to see that his silence is not a sign of distance, but an invitation to draw nearer to him. Through these times, we develop endurance, faith, and a deeper understanding of his love as he shapes us for his purposes, even when we cannot hear his voice. The idea that God would immediately answer all our prayers all of the times is foreign to the Bible. God always answers in his time. But even when he does not speak, when we ask him to speak, he's still forming us. And we need to learn, and this is mature faith, what I'm saying now. We need to learn to let God form us through silence. Because I know that we're used to hear a word, and then I hear it, and I apply it. I mean, at least we should do that, right? Next level will be to not hear and grow. To go before God like this woman, who was a no one, less than even culturally. And she is letting Jesus shape her faith through his silence. And I wonder, when was the last time that you have come before God with all sorts of things as you should? And then somehow, for whatever reason, God chooses to meet you with silence. Do you perceive God working through silent and quiet moments in your life? And today I want to say that that is part of how he is growing our faith, through silence. Sometimes he answers immediately, sometimes he doesn't, but he always will. What we learn from Jesus' encounter with the Canaanite woman is that sometimes Jesus, he is silent because he wants to deal with our faith first and then answer prayers. That's why Jesus was silent. She says, Lord, heal my demon-possessed, oppressed girl. And he's silent. Why? Because Jesus could, of course, heal her. And we know like he does, right? And what we learn from this, I think, is that sometimes Jesus is silent because he wants to deal with you first before he answers your prayer. Because sometimes we may not be ready for the prayers to be answered. It actually, long term, in God's great wisdom, him answering our prayers immediately would work against us. Now, we don't see that, we don't know that, but this is what mature faith does, is that I'm going to let God work on me before he's answering my prayers. We need to remember that God answers in his own terms and in his own timing. That's why when I hear of people who say, I spend 5 minutes a day in prayer with God, it's like, what if he's just getting ready to answer the prayer in 5 minutes? What if he wants to answer at minute 7 and 25 seconds? We don't know. That's why the more time you spend in God's presence, the bigger the likelihood is that he's going to answer and, more importantly, shape you into the man or woman that he wants you to become. He wants our faith to grow. Jesus wants to mature our faith. And I've had to learn to accept seasons and moments of silence in my relationship with God. Not only that, but I've learned that his silence is what grows and matures my faith. It's his silence that draws me even closer to him. Whereas when I was a younger believer, younger in faith, his silence would draw me away from him, pull me away from his presence. Because why isn't God answering me when I say? Children do that. Their patience is like this. Mom, give me. If you say no, they're venting and who knows what. Spiritually speaking, we have people who maybe their biological age doesn't match their faith age, because it happens whenever God called you to him. But if you are having a tantrum inwardly, when God doesn't do what you want to do, you are a spiritually immature person. Now, that is not wrong, but you need to grow. And let me say it with love and respect, you need to grow up. And I need to grow up. Throwing tantrums is not how God works in our lives. But we need to accept the time of silence because he's shaping and molding us even then. If God is silent in this season of your life, keep approaching him. Keep asking, keep knocking, keep sharing your heart before him. And in due time, he will answer about what is 100% surely happening in seasons of silence is that God is shaping you and taking your faith to those borders and beyond them. But growth hurts. And by nature, we run away from pain. I remember when I was a teenager how my bones were hurting. And what should I have done? So, okay, let me stay at whatever, 1 meter, in English terms, right? 50 feet, whatever. Is that a lot? That's a lot. I'm 5 foot, right? Good. Whatever. 1 foot, right? Let me stay there because my bones are hurting. I don't want to grow. Even physically, even our biology and anatomy teaches us that in order for you to develop physically, you go through some times of pain. You go through some weird times where even your voice changes. Remember, guys? That's why it's good for a preacher, if he's a man, to not start young, because his voice is still maturing in many other ways, okay? So, if God is silent, keep approaching him, because silence is not abandonment. Silence is not abandonment. When God seems silent, it doesn't mean he has abandoned us. Jesus' silence towards the Canaanite woman was not an indication of his lack of love and care for her. It was actually a test to draw out the persistent faith and the mature faith Jesus knew she was capable of. In the same way, when we encounter silence in our prayers or during trials, it is an opportunity for us to press deeper into God, trusting that he hears us and he is working for our good, even if we cannot see it immediately. God tests our faith through silence. The second test is the test of apparent rejection. Jesus' seemingly harsh response to the Canaanite woman revealed a process of faith building. He wanted to build her faith, and through her persistence, through her humility and unwavering belief in Jesus' mercy, we see how God uses challenges to strengthen us, to push us beyond our limits, and to refine us and mature our trust in him. The Canaanite woman refuses to walk away, showing that her faith is not shallow but resilient, even in the face of apparent rejection and denial. If Jesus would tell you no, most of us would turn our back towards him, because that's what we do when someone does something we don't like, especially when someone rejects us. Well, if you don't want me, I don't want you. Children. And I relate to that. But when she was met with rejection, she did not turn her back on Jesus. Her persistence begins to annoy his disciples. Disciples who urged Jesus to send her away because she's too much. Jesus rejects her, the disciples reject her, and yet for whatever reason, as we'll see, she does not give up. Take a hint. Faith means that we do not take a hint. Faith means that no matter what people around Jesus say, that no matter what the people of God, Christians, say, we do not give up on Jesus. Because sometimes even the people who surround Jesus, even people who take on the name of Jesus, like Christians, even they may be wrong in what they say. That's why sometimes we need to look straight to Jesus. Sometimes Jesus is using the rejection of people in your life to strengthen your faith. And man, that's painful. It's hard. But isn't God still in control even when people seem to gang against you? It was the disciples of Jesus. Like men of God. Who say, send her away. Who said that if it were up to us, this woman's girl will never be healed. Because somehow we let our own culture influence the kingdom culture that God has. Which in those moments that Jesus has a wider vision than even we have. These moments of rejection serve to heighten the sense of denial that we receive seemingly from God. As even the disciples, those closest to Jesus, seem eager to dismiss her need. But when Jesus finally speaks, his words do not seem comforting. I was not sent except for the lost sheep of the house of Israel, he says, reminding of his primary mission to the Jews. For someone in her position, this could easily feel like exclusion, being told that she doesn't belong to the group that Jesus came to save. Yet the Canaanite woman's faith was undeterred. That's why I'm telling you, this is mature faith right here. She continues to believe that Jesus can heal her daughter, even though the situation seems hopeless. And in response, what does she do? She bows before him and says, Lord, help me. Can you imagine going against every feeling you have, and instead of running away from Jesus, venting, throwing tantrums, being angry, she goes before him, kneels down before him, and says, Lord, help me. With everyone who rejected her, with everyone who dismissed her, she has a mature faith where she knows that her faith does not depend on what others say about her, but on Jesus who can heal her. And this plea, simple and full of humility, shows her dependence on Jesus' mercy. She does not argue or assert her worthiness, but continues to trust in his grace. God often matures our faith by allowing us to experience what feels like rejection. We should not be surprised that we sometimes feel rejected by God's people or even by God. Don't do it intentionally, okay? That's not the lesson here. Do not reject people and say, it's okay, God is going to work, maybe, but then you need to deal with God, right? But sometimes God is growing us through rejection. God often matures our faith by allowing us to experience those kind of situations. And in the case of the Canaanite woman, each stage of her interaction with Jesus feels like doors being closed. He's silent, he rejects her, disciples reject her. And yet, she does not give up. Because at each of these stages, it looks like she's drawing even closer to Jesus. It's like her faith is maturing with every closed door. With every word of rejection, with every silent treatment she's experiencing, her faith grows even deeper, which goes against what we would expect to happen. When Jesus doesn't answer her initial plea, she doesn't turn away in defeat, but she presses on, believing that he hears her. And this kind of faith is not dependent on immediate answers, on instant gratification, or favorable responses. It is rooted in a deep trust in Jesus' power and goodness, even when his actions don't align with her expectations. What do you do when God's actions don't align with your expectations of what God should do? What do you do in those moments? Similarly, Jesus is reminded that he was sent to the lost sheep of Israel could have been a crushing blow to her hopes, but instead of retreating and giving up, this woman worships him. When was the last time when you went before God and had a similar situation as a daughter that is oppressed by a demon, right? This is big stuff. And Jesus is silent. Jesus rejects you. His people reject you. Do you bow down in worship in those moments? Yeah. Before the one who apparently rejects you. Before the one who apparently is silent. With people who reject you. Like the disciples. This act of worship in the face of seeming rejection illustrates a key truth. Faith often grows strongest when it perseveres to trials. Faith grows strongest when it perseveres to trials. The Canaanite woman is a model for how we should respond when God seems distant or unresponsive. She demonstrates the kind of trust that doesn't waver when things don't go according to plan. Each apparent rejection serves not to weaken her faith, but to strengthen it, revealing depth and resilience. I read about this young salesman who became discouraged because he had been rejected by so many customers that he approached. He asked a more experienced salesman for some advice. Why is it that every time I make a call on someone, I get rejected? I just don't understand that, answered the older man. I've been hit on the head, called dirty names, and thrown out the door, but I have never been rejected. says the older salesman. You see, rejection isn't what happens to us, but how we interpret what happens to us. She couldn't take a hint. And I know that those are annoying salesmen who's like, come on. Actually, in Portugal, we're chilling on the sunbeds. And there's this guy who comes and looks at me. He says, oh, you have skin like mine. Are you from Colombia as well? I said, no. But I understand why you say that. I said, and then he's insisting with his bracelets. I said, how much? 35 pounds. I'm not paying that much for that. It's like it's from the mountain and stuff like this. And then my wife understood he couldn't take a hint. I was not in the mood of negotiating, but one of the bracelets was nice. And she negotiated down to €5 or something like that. So it's like, sometimes you can find the middle ground, But the idea is that when you want something to happen, you don't give up on it. More than that, when you know someone can help you, you don't give up on trying. You may try different strategies. You may find some healthy compromise. It doesn't matter. And I think that sometimes we do not have a powerful prayer life is because we don't know that God can give us what we ask. That God has the money to pay for the bracelet. And if we do not insist on God, that's what I'm saying. 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day of prayer. I'm sorry, it's not enough. Because maybe you go through a season that is similar to a demon-possessed, oppressed girl. But I promise you, 2 minutes of prayer do not work against that. Even Jesus says that this kind, speaking to some demons, come out only with what? Prayer and fasting. And don't even get me started on fasting. Because this God of our belly sometimes controls what we do more than the Holy Spirit that is God living in us. That's why I say sometimes we have Christians that are still overstaying their welcome on the hospital bed when there's demon-possessed people who need freeing, who need deliverance, who need healing, who need to know Jesus. Where are the people with whom God wants to work? Right? It's us. And if we don't push into God's presence through prayer and fasting, through communion, through encouraging one another, when God does bring people here in this place, who's going to minister to them? I promise you, as great as you may think I am, I'm limited. But together, we can make a difference in the life. So maybe prophetic for some of you, get out of that hospital bed because you're healthy now. And I love you. But there's people we need to look after. And I cannot do it on my own. I want to, but I can't. It's just, I'm limited, okay? So the story of the Canaanite woman offers powerful lessons for how Jesus uses apparent rejection to mature our faith. She persevered, and she did not give up. Her story teaches us that what seems like rejection is often an invitation to press further into God's grace, trusting in His sufficiency even when His ways are hidden from us. Finally, is the test of apparent offense. This one is the most striking moment in the Canaanite woman's encounter with Jesus. When Jesus seemingly insults her by referring to her as a dog. That could easily be misunderstood as cruel. However, this scene and this moment reveals a greater purpose. The exchange between Jesus and the Canaanite woman appears shocking at first glance. When she begs him to heal her demon-possessed daughter, Jesus responds with a statement that would seem offensive. It is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. In Jewish culture, Gentiles, so non-Jewish people, were often referred to as dogs, a term signifying that they are outsiders. But Jesus was not rejecting her or belittling her. He was testing her faith. What if God tests your faith by causing you some offense? Indeed. What if? His purpose was to reveal the maturity of her faith, the maturity of her trust in Him. And by framing the situation in a way that could have provoked anger or offense, Jesus was drawing out of her humility and perseverance. Far from being an insult meant to dismiss her, it was an opportunity for her faith to shine. I remember in Bible college, whenever I was offended by whatever, there was this guy, one of the directors, you have not met him, so he was asked me to go and hoover his carpets in his house. And I'm like, don't you have a hoover? Like, can't you do it? I'm happy to do stuff around the Bible college, but why don't you do it for yourself? Like, I was a bit mean as well. And they were saying the same thing all the time. It's part of the process. It's like, So it means I can say whatever I want to you, and then I just get out of it by saying, it's part of the process. Come and clean my toilets is part of the process. I was a bit mean, but you know what? It is actually part of the process. Not his process, mind you, but God. And God was still forming in me and destroying my own pride. I may be right in what I think about that guy, but it's irrelevant because God has a process to mature me. Her response to Jesus' reminder about his mission to the Jews is not one of entitlement or anger. Instead, she worships him and pleads for mercy, like even dogs eat crumbs. That's sort of what she says to him. This humility is key to her great faith. She doesn't argue that she deserves anything from Jesus. Rather, she acknowledges that any blessing she might receive would be purely out of his grace. And for believers, this teaches us how to approach God with humble hearts, recognizing that we are not owed anything, yet trusting fully in his mercy. Imagine a child asking a parent for something they need, and the parent temporarily withholds it to see how the child would respond. Will they give up or keep asking? The loving parent isn't being cruel, but is nurturing the child's persistence and teaching the children resilience. If you always give children everything they want, they will not mature and they will not grow. In the same way, Jesus' response to the Canaanite woman was designed to strengthen her faith. Instead of being deterred by his words, she presses on, even accepting the analogy of being called a dog if it means receiving blessing and healing for her daughter. Her humility and determination reflect the depth of her faith. And I think her faith is way more mature than many of ours nowadays. Come on, who doesn't give up on Jesus when he rejects them? We need to cultivate a faith that perseveres even in the face of trials. God's grace is sufficient even when it seems like he's withholding blessings. The Canaanite woman believed that even the crumbs of Jesus' grace, the crumbs of his healing, the crumbs of his power were enough to heal her daughter. And trust me, it's enough. One crumb of Jesus' grace can help you to see the breakthrough you're longing for in your life. But persevere. Stop getting so easily offended. Stop turning away when he's silent. Stop running away when he rejects stuff. This teaches us that even when we feel we are receiving little from God, his grace is more than enough to sustain us. What might seem like crumbs are in fact blessings. Blessings that hold the power to transform our circumstances. So as I finish, Gid, you can join if you want. There are times when it may feel like God is distant. There are times when it may feel like God is silent. There are times when it may feel like God is dismissive. But this is often a testing ground for our faith. The Canaanite woman's example teaches that believers must persist in prayer and trust God's character, even when it seems to withhold blessings or the answers we desire. Mature faith does not retreat in face of difficulty. It presses forward with humility, trusting that God's mercy, trusting that God's goodness will ultimately prevail. And by embracing this kind of persistent faith, Christians can grow stronger and deeper in their walk with God. God uses challenges to refine and deepen the faith of his people. At times, he will test our faith because he desires to mature our faith. Faith that is not tested is immature faith. Faith that is tested has the end goal of maturing that faith. And the question is, are you willing to push through in order for your faith to mature? Mature faith go through these tests, 3 tests of silence, of rejection, and offense. But those who will endure are those who will mature. The Canaanite woman's story becomes a powerful example of how mature faith responds. Not with offense, not with discouragement, not with giving up, not with running away, not with throwing tantrums, not with feeling offended, but with unwavering trust in God's mercy. Luciana, shall we sing one last song? I know we're just slightly ahead. But I want to encourage you. What are we singing? Because of who you are. Talent. That's my gifting. As we sing this song and it says, because of who you are, can I encourage you to, if possible, and if it's not so painful, think about the season of your faith right now. And in which way is God desiring to mature your faith right now? It may feel like pain, it may feel like rejection, it may feel like offense or insult or silence. If there are areas in your life that feel like that, I put it before you, that is God saying, that's the area where I want to grow your faith right now. And because of who He is, do not give up. Do not run away. Take it in, because on the other side of your limitations, there's a life that you cannot even imagine, a life full of faith, where like this Canaanite woman, who is not talked about enough, like this Canaanite woman, you'll develop mature faith that can bless those around you, and of course, see breakthrough like she saw, because Jesus did heal her daughter because she did not give. So let's worship Jesus. Let's stand if that's okay, and then I'll come and conclude with a prayer.